Consideren que si el relato bíblico de la creación es un hecho y no fábula, entonces la teoría de la evolución está toda mojada. Los descubrimientos confirmados serían el más grande hallazgo arqueológico de todos los tiempos y provee a los fundamentalistas religiosos toda la evidencia de que la Biblia es absolutamente confiable. Así, el Arca de Noé ha venido a ser el artículo más controversial que haya sido registrado por el hombre.
Before the great flood, the world had become filled with wicked men, so much so that the Lord decided to destroy the face of the earth. And God said to Noah, "The end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth." The Lord chose Noah, a man of God, to build an ark in which the righteous would be saved along with some of the animals. Noah preached of conversion and repentance for 120 years, but only 8 people gave their hearts to the Lord and entered the ark. The rain came, and the people sought the safety of higher ground or the ark itself. But the angel of the Lord had closed the door of the ark, and it could not be opened. Probation had closed. It was too late. Death and destruction covered the earth. The thoughts of man were evil continually. God extended an invitation, but it was not accepted. This was a judgment of man. All the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened, and the rain was on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. So he destroyed all living things which were on the face of the ground. God had saved his people through the flood, but they would spend almost 1 year in the ark, waiting for the floodwaters to recede and new life to begin. Noah and his family were anxious to leave the ark. Finally, Noah knew it was safe to leave. He offered a sacrifice to the Lord. In eastern Turkey, across the valley from Mount Ararat, is the site we will be visiting. This area was first photographed in an aerial survey conducted in 1959 by Francis Gary Powers. Later, Turkish Lieutenant Duripanar spotted the boat-shaped object in these photographs, so in 1960, a group from the United States journeyed to the site, but they prematurely concluded it was just a natural formation. That same year, Life magazine featured photos of the site. Is there a historical record from ancient civilizations of Noah's Ark existing? Berosus the Chaldean wrote, "It is said there is still some part of the ship in Armenia, at the mountain of the Chaldeans, and some people carry off pieces of the bitumen, which they take away, and use chiefly as amulets for the averting of mischiefs." Today, we can look at a map of Turkey and see this site listed as Nuhun Gemisi, or Noah's Big Boat. Making the trip to the site, we landed next to the very large Lake Van, which once hosted the ancient capital of Urartu named Tushpa, located along its shore. Heading out through the countryside, we see an extinct volcano. Crossing a mountain, we soon see our first glimpse of the famous Mount Ararat in the distance. In the shadows of Ararat is the city of Dobayazit that we pass through, heading toward the Noah's Ark site. Mount Ararat is a beautiful mountain, complete with a rich history of mountain climbers searching for the Ark, but without success. Across the valley, we stop and see the government-erected road sign, Nuhun Gemisi, 5 kilometers up the mountain. On Ron Wyatt's first trip to the region in 1977, he didn't know where to begin searching, and he only had 3 days in the area. So he and his teenage sons prayed that their taxi would stall in areas where they needed to search. That day, God stalled their taxi in 3 different locations, and here is our first taxi stop. High on the mountain is the resting place of Noah's ship. The name of this mountain is translated as Doomsday Mountain, named so for the deadly event of the flood. As we drive up the mountain, we can see Lesser Ararat and Greater Ararat across the valley. Both are post-flood volcanic mountains that were not even here during the flood, and they would be the last place one should search for the Ark. We finally made it to the Ark. Looking at it from the stern or rear, one can see the boat-shaped outline of the Ark. It has a rounded stern and a pointed bow or front. The symmetrical shape indicates that it is a man-made structure. Ron Wyatt made 24 trips out here to conduct tests and do research at this boat-shaped formation. Photos taken at different times of the year have brought out different features of the boat. There was so much convincing evidence uncovered at the site that the Turkish government declared this area to be Noah's Ark National Park, and yet today, the world is unaware of this amazing discovery. Using Google Earth, we can zoom in on the site with satellite imagery to see the Ark, and also the visitor center that was constructed by the Turkish government. It was on June 21, 1987, that a ceremony was held on the mountain to commemorate the site as Noah's Ark National Park. Dignitaries from around the country assembled to break bread and celebrate this wonderful find. The governor, military officers, and other key officials were participating in a celebration of discovery. Ron Wyatt was a special guest because of the extensive work that he had accomplished at the site. The visitor center would welcome guests from around the world to gaze upon the Ark. As concrete was placed in the foundation by the governor and by Ron Wyatt, excitement was in the air. This was a monument to the mortal remains of Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark was found. The next day, an article appeared in Turkey's largest newspaper announcing Noah's Big Boat, open for tourists. Our way inside the visitor center to view the informative evidence on display. Various diagrams and photos are assembled to point out the important features of the Ark. Specimens from the Ark are also on display, including petrified wood and sea fossils from the area, which indicate this mountain is water-laid rock. A guest book shows us that people are visiting the site from all over the world. Many different countries are represented here. Hasan Ozer has worked in the visitor center since it opened. He has lived his entire life in a village here on the mountain, just above the Ark, and has a great deal of history associated with the Ark. His photo appeared in a Knoxville, Tennessee newspaper, so our team brought him a laminated copy for his own. Hasan now tells us some interesting history about the Ark formation.
Senesinde gece bir kayma deprem oldu. Sabahleyin baktık ki her taraf gitmiş. Nun gemisi bir ada güçlüğüne kalmıştır. Her akşam üzerinde bir elektrik lambası gibi bir ışık yanardı.
In 48, there was an earthquake, and it was in the night time, and we just wake up in the morning and we see the earth was moved, and we saw the shape like an ark.
De ki 1960 yıllarında Türk Hava Kuvvetleri'ne bağlı bir pilot tarafından bunun fotoğrafı çekiyor. Gidiyor Ankara'ya.
69'da, ha?
1960 yıllarında.
60 yıllarında.
Şunlar söyle.
Also, after that time, there was a light we could see in the night time in the up on the village when we look down to the ark side, and people was believing that it's holy things, and when they come on to the next to the ark, this light is going off. You know, you cannot find.
Benim kendi şahsi olarak ben de hem inanıyorum hem de karar veriyorum. Çünkü neden? Her taraf gitti, Nuh'un gemisi o böyle ada gibi içinde kaldı. Her akşam üzerinde bir ışık yanardı. Sarı, yeşil, kırmızı. Kimisi diyorsa burası bir ziyarettir, kimisi bir türbe, kimisi bir hazinedir. Ama araştırma yapıldıktan sonra izin aradan kayboldu gitti, ben de inanıyorum. Söyle da bir daha var, söyle onu söyle.
He say that if in my personal thinking is well, I see after this earthquake there is a shape like an arc, and also there was a light which is colored light, green, yellow, and reddish lights we saw there, and lots of people were in the village. They were saying that's the holy place. Somebody says there is some gold, we should go dig it up and stuff like this. They say especially when you come next to it, it's going off. The light you cannot see anymore. But he said after the government confirmed that that's the Noah's Ark, there is no light anymore. And that's make me think it is Noah's Ark.
Ground-penetrating radar was used on the formation to see what is inside. The reflections created a picture of timbers underground. This diagram shows us some of the main structural elements of the Ark, including parallel and repeated patterns, indicating a man-made site.
Indeed, there is something beneath that rock besides rock. A radar device developed by Geophysical Survey Systems in Hudson was used on the mountain. The device, called SIR, is used by energy exploration companies to analyze what's below the Earth's surface. According to SIR, something man-made is under Mount Eridog.
This data does not represent natural geology. It's a man-made structure. These reflections are occurring very periodic, too periodic to be random natural type interface.
Compared to an aircraft carrier 1,000 feet long, we can see the Ark is quite large. The Ark was a high-tech vessel that was designed to survive a catastrophic flood that would destroy the surface of the Earth. Complete with a keel, keelsawns, and anchor stones, it was truly a work of art designed to save the human race from annihilation. The Bible tells us the Ark was 300 cubits in length. The Ark formation has been measured to be 515 feet long, which is exactly 300 Egyptian cubits. Moses, when writing the Genesis account, would have been accustomed to using the longer Egyptian cubit of 20.6 inches. The Bible mentions an earlier cubit, cubits according to the former measure. This references the Egyptian cubit, which was divided into 28 digits, making up the cubit rod. Many centuries later, the 18-inch Hebrew cubit was developed and implemented. At the Tel Megiddo in Israel, Solomon's gates can be measured to exactly 6 Egyptian cubits, showing further evidence of its early usage. One can easily see the rib timbers near the stern on the starboard side of the Ark. This was part of the superstructure of the Ark, much like ships are constructed today. Horizontal boards would have been attached to these vertical ribs. Here we can see vertical fissures between the ribs. These ribs run perpendicular to the mud flow around the structure, indicating once again man-made construction. Local village boys greet us as we take a look at the starboard side of the Ark, which curves uphill toward the front of the Ark. This side is predominantly buried in the soil. The outside of the bow, or front, is just before us, and then we scan down the starboard side to see the top of the rib timbers. In the distance, we can see Mount Ararat and Lesser Ararat. We now pan over to the port side of the Ark near the stern. This side is less preserved, but we can see one large rib timber standing at attention. It has been beautifully preserved and has retained the curvature of the hull. From here we look toward the front of the Ark, and we can see a large hole which was blown open in 1960, when the first group came here from the United States to inspect the site. We are now standing on the middle deck of the Ark, and now pan over to the interior of the port side, where we can see 4 horizontal protrusions in a row. They are arranged in a regular pattern, indicating man-made construction. These would have been horizontal deck support timbers, extending toward the middle of the deck. At the stern, we can see the symmetrical shape of the boat, including the center mound, where the decks have collapsed one on top of another. Continuing to inspect the stern, we can see 5 objects in a row along the inside port area of the deck. These have been measured at regular intervals and appear to be vertical posts that would have supported the deck. The Ark originally came to rest higher on the mountain, but was pulled down to its current location amidst a lava or mud flow, which impaled it on this rock outcropping. Ron Wyatt was operating his ground-penetrating equipment before Turkish authorities when he spotted an object just below the surface. What they found was this beautiful deck timber. It was tested at Galbraith Labs for organic carbon. The level of organic carbon was extremely high, thus proving this object was once living matter, consistent with wood. Mr. Wyatt was able to display the deck timber on CNN when he was interviewed on their network. The timber is in 3 layers, much like plywood, with glue oozing out at the end. This makes it stronger than one solid piece of wood. The outer area is covered in black pitch. Some nails can also be seen on its surface. This layering of wood may have been the gopher wood mentioned in Genesis. Just above the Ark site is the Uzungili village. Its former name in the 19th century was Nasr. This pronunciation is similar to Nicer, a village that the Babylonian Berosus described as being near the Ark site. Josephus in the 1st century said, "Its remains are shown there by the inhabitants to this day." This would tell us the Ark would be in an accessible location. These local villagers would have had a tourist trade, accommodating visitors to the Ark. The visitors to the Ark would have stayed overnight here and would have bought souvenirs in the village. Using radar equipment, Ron Wyatt discovered an open cavity on the starboard side of the Ark. Utilizing a core drilling technique, he was able to gain access to the interior of the Ark. Stunning evidence was pulled from the belly of the ship. Using an improvised long rake device, petrified animal dung was extracted from the hull. Next, cat hair was also pulled from the cavity. Then, a petrified antler was extracted. These are all items that one would expect to find in the bottom of the Ark. The Bible tells us the antediluvians were skilled in metalworking. Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every craftsman in bronze and iron. This large metal rivet, or metal washer around a metal rod, was found by Ron Wyatt when he had taken a tour group to the site in 1991. The center rod had been struck while it was hot, causing it to flare out, holding the washer in place. Test results showed that it contained 8% aluminum metal. Aluminum metal is man-made, thus proving the site to be man-made. Skeptics have said Mr. Wyatt was lying about the testing. But was he really? When the Ark Discovery International team was at the Ark site, they used a metal detector to locate metal fittings on the Ark. This is a crescent-shaped piece of metal that had been a circular washer in its better days and was found near the bow on the port side. A portion of it tested at Galbraith Labs in Tennessee, and the results were stunning. It was 8% aluminum metal, just as Ron Wyatt's test had revealed. The test additionally showed a small amount of titanium metal that is also man-made. The Ark Discovery team continued its analysis at the site and located another fitting on the starboard side. A portion of it was sent to Galbraith Labs for testing, and again, there were incredible results. It contained 8% aluminum metal, 1.3% titanium metal, plus 3.8% magnesium metal, all indicative of the Ark formation being a man-made structure. The Encyclopedia Britannica tells us, Because of its chemical activity, aluminum never occurs in the metallic form in nature. These unique metal components are special markers that were left behind, which prove the site is without a doubt a man-made structure utilizing high-tech construction techniques consistent with what we should find in Noah's Ark. Modern man didn't discover how to make aluminum metal until around 1900, but the antediluvians had this knowledge in their day. Other metal fittings were found on the port side of the deck. Our metal detector picked up metal readings where a rectangular plate was positioned on a flat plane. This plate originally had 6 rivets. One is still visible on the left side. Other metal fittings can be seen around the Ark in various locations. The metal fittings have different colors from the surrounding material, making it easier to locate them at the site. On the outer portion of the Ark, at a higher level, we were able to see this object that appears to be a metal cap on top of a vertical post. It has an X impression embossed in the center of it. The left side of the cap is missing, but the top and this immediate side are still affixed to the post. The X impression is indicative of a man-made structure with the 90-degree angle. The second taxi stop is the village of Kazan, where large anchor stones can be found that once hung from the rear of the Ark. Just down the valley from Noah's Ark, we come to the village of Kazan, where portions of the Ark's directional system were released, thus allowing the Ark to float more freely. This village was known as the Place of the Eight, named so for the 8 survivors of the flood. This is the first area that Noah and his family lived after the flood. The large anchor stones were hung from the rear of the Ark to keep the rear facing oncoming waves. It created a type of resistance in the water, allowing the rounded rear of the Ark to fend off powerful waves that would critically damage the Ark if struck broadside. This is our first anchor stone. Measuring 11 feet in height, with 4 feet embedded in the ground, it is actually the largest and most beautiful anchor stone found to date. A tapered hole was drilled into the top of each anchor stone, a 5-inch opening on one side and a 7-inch opening on the other, allowing a rope to be pulled through and a knot tied. It was designed to be lifted while in the water when it would weigh less, thereby preventing the top from breaking off. The most striking feature is the crosses that have been carved on the anchor stone. Early Christians came through this area and recognized these objects as biblical items from the Ark. They carved crosses on these anchor stones, representing Noah and his family. The largest cross here represents Noah and is of the Crusader style. The diamond shape with a cross above was Nimrod's sign when he was alive. The diamond represents the Ark that he took credit for. Then the vertical line is the pathway to heaven, with the crossbar representing heaven. The Egyptians had an adaptation of this symbol called the Ankh. Smaller anchor stones or drogue stones can be found near the Mediterranean. This is one of the largest you will ever see outside the Noah's Ark area. The next anchor stone is partially buried in the ground with 5 crosses. The largest cross represents Noah. The next smallest, Mrs. Noah. Then the 3 smallest are the sons of Noah. At the bottom is a possible image of the Tower of Babel, which was built around 200 years after the flood by Nimrod and his rebellious followers. This particular stone has 7 crosses, with the 8th having been removed at some point in time. This stone has a large cross representing Noah. The next smaller cross on the bottom left is Mrs. Noah. The next 3 smaller crosses represent the 3 sons. Then, the 3 smallest represent the wives of the sons. This stone does not have any carvings on it, but it does have a hole drilled through the top. Other stones have been found buried, but they have no inscriptions. This stone had a hole drilled in the left side. Then on the right, we can see ancient inscriptions. Vandals have broken this stone, but you can see where the hole once was in the top. Crosses have also been carved on this stone. 5 crosses are on this anchor stone, and as we look at the top, we can see where the hole has been broken off. Outside the village of Kazan is a large object that has the appearance of petrified tree bark and with unusual characteristics.
As far as we know, there's nothing else like this anywhere. Nobody's ever...
My goodness.
It's got crosses that are very faintly carved on it. You got a big one here. You got a small one right there. One here. One here. They're harder to see over here.
And this is petrified wood?
Well,
it looks like
Ron said he thought it was petrified
bark.
Tree bark.
Right.
If you look at the, you ever see? It looks like a little bit like pine bark.
It sounds like metal.
Why would the anchor stone be wood?
This isn't an anchor stone.
Oh, I see.
This was just like something that was on the ark, right? I believe.
Well, Ron theorized that this might have been the or part of the cover. You remember at one point it says, and Noah came out of the ark and he took the cover off, or he threw the cover off. And of course that's just speculation. We don't have a way of knowing, but this is a rather unique thing. It has the appearance and the texture of some kind of a bark, but it is stone.
That is a cross.
What?
That is a cross.
There you go.
That is incredible.
It has a very hollow sound.
Very hollow. It sounds like metal.
But it's just a
it's just that's its harmonic ring.
right.
Yeah.
Harmonic resonance. You're right.
Yeah.
But there's not many stones that do that.
That's true.
With the sun coming out.
Well, I think there's 8 crosses on it. We've been able to find 7. I think there's an 8th one up there.
Our next taxi stop is the home of Noah, near the village of Kazan. This photo was taken in 1977 by Ron Wyatt, showing the walls of Noah's home. Since then, all the walls have been torn down by local treasure seekers. In the front yard stood this large tombstone. On the tombstone was a drawing of 8 people and a boat on a wave. The second largest person was looking downward with their eyes closed. This indicates that this was Mrs. Noah's tombstone. After Mr. Wyatt showed this to someone, that person later hired others to exhume Mrs. Noah's 18-foot sarcophagus. Its depression in the ground is still visible today. Her jewelry was later sold on the black market for millions of dollars. Extending out from Noah's house are these ancient stone fences for containing animals. In Genesis, we are told that Noah practiced husbandry. In this case, we can see signs of animal husbandry. Some fences are more prominent than others, but they are all in straight lines. Uphill, behind Noah's home, is this large altar that he would have used to sacrifice animals to the Lord. It is approximately 10 feet in diameter and has a cube-like shape. In conclusion, we can say that the Darupanar, Noah's Ark formation, is full of evidence which confirms its authenticity, especially when we objectively consider all the information. Many books have been written about the discovery of the Ark. It has been featured in many newspapers and television programs, but most of the world is not aware of this beautiful discovery, which refutes evolution and proves the Bible to be truth. In God's timing, He will reveal this to all mankind.
On June 20th, 1987, in the mountains of Ararat, Turkey officially recognized the discovery of Noah's Ark. Located on a mountainside about 15 miles south of the volcanic Mount Ararat, the remains of the massive ship were dedicated during a special ceremony. Guest of honor was Ron Wyatt, due to his 10 years of research at the site. The story began in 1957 during the Cold War, when aerial photos taken of eastern Turkey while searching for Soviet missile bases revealed a strange boat-shaped formation in the mountains about 6,300 feet above sea level. Life magazine reported on the story after an expedition from the United States went to the site in 1960. Blowing holes in the strange formation, the members of the team came away with the conclusion that there was nothing there of any archaeological interest. Ron Wyatt, like many others, read the story, but he was of the opinion that the site needed further exploration. There had been many claims of seeing Noah's Ark on the volcanic Mount Ararat, but Ron knew that it was a stratovolcano, and he believed that nothing would have been able to survive there. He noted the biblical account of the location of the ark. And the ark rested in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, upon the mountains of Ararat. Urartu, the biblical Ararat, was a large region in eastern Turkey. This location was certainly feasible. But the factor that captured his interest the most was the length given in the Life magazine story, 500 feet. Most people were looking for a 437-foot Noah's Ark based on the Hebrew cubit, but Ron again went to the Bible to learn more. And Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. Moses was the author of the Genesis account of the flood. He would have known the cubit of the Egyptians. The Hebrew cubit didn't come into existence until there was a Hebrew nation after Moses' death. The Encyclopedia Britannica stated, "The Egyptian cubit is generally recognized as having been the most ubiquitous or universal standard of linear measurement in the very ancient world. The royal cubit equals 20.62 inches. This would mean Noah's Ark was much longer than 437 feet. 17 years after the Life magazine article, Ron finally made the journey to Turkey. When he saw the boat-shaped object, he saw that it looked just like it did in 1960. And he knew he would need permission to excavate in order to learn anything about what was beneath the surface. So he returned home and enlisted a number of friends to help him pray for an earthquake to reveal more. In late 1978, he learned of an earthquake in eastern Turkey and returned in August of 1979. When he arrived, he was overwhelmed by what he saw. The earthquake had dropped the soil around the object, and a large crack extended the entire length. He could see what looked to him like the remains of decayed rib timbers along the now exposed sides. Also, he was able to measure the depth of the debris and measure the length. It was 515 feet, or exactly 300 Royal Egyptian cubits. He was now convinced. He carefully combed the surface, looking for evidence that it was a shipwreck. He saw what he believed were petrified structures of an ancient ship whose deck had collapsed. He saw what looked like deck joists and deck support timbers. Of particular interest was the fact that the ship appeared to be impaled on a large outcropping of limestone. He concluded that this indicated that the ship had slid into the rock from another location. Before he made his first trip to Turkey, he had done an experiment in a nearby lake, building mountain configurations out of rocks and floating a boat model by them to see the reaction of the boat. He noted that a crescent shape caused the water to pull the boat into the crescent, where the boat remained and gently floated. the present location did not fit with the results of that experiment, so Ron decided to examine the area above the boat shape. The site was in a moving mud flow, so he followed the mud flow up the mountainside. About 1.5 miles up, he found a crescent shape of mountains. He saw that the mud flow began up here. When he arrived near the top of the ridge, he found an ancient stele, like an ancient billboard, which depicted the boat shape, the familiar mountain ridge, several birds, and 8 faces within the boat shape. Clearly, this was a reference to the ship of Noah and its 8 survivors. He noticed a taller mountain peak on the stele that was no longer visible from that location. He concluded that it was a small volcano that had erupted long after Noah's Ark had landed, and that it had carried the ship down the mountainside about 1 mile, where it was impaled on the limestone outcropping, then covered in lava. The lava then encased the ship like a time capsule. The volcano then collapsed after expending its lava and was no longer visible. He then theorized that as the lava began to decay, water seeped in and allowed the remains to be petrified or fossilized by the process called mineral replacement. Molecule by molecule would be washed away from the remains and replaced by molecules from the objects and substances above it. As he examined the area within the crescent shape, he found a large section, 120 by 40 feet, approximately, of what appeared to be fossilized wood in the ground. He believed this to be the bottom of the ship, the original landing site. His conclusion was that when the floodwaters subsided, the ark sank into the muddy earth. This held the ship upright. Then God sent the wind to dry the face of the earth. The portion of the ship that sank into the mud was now firmly embedded in the ground. Many years later, when the lava carried the ship down the mountain, the main body of the ship was ripped loose. Only this section remained in their original location. Around this area that Ron believed to be embedded petrified wood, he found specimens of rock which looked very unique to him. He took several samples, along with several specimens from the boat shape below. Back home, he sent them for analysis. The results showed organic carbon, which indicated that the samples were consistent with decayed and fossilized wood. They also contained metals such as iron and aluminum. The analysis of the strange-looking rock Ron had found about 1.5 miles above the site by the bottom of the ship was clearly the most exciting. His initial analysis had shown it to be metals and not rock. In 1984, Ron met and became friends with Colonel Jim Irwin, the former astronaut. Colonel Irwin was searching for Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat, but he was very gracious and was interested in seeing the boat-shaped site. Ron had brought a metal detector to the site to see if there was a pattern of metal readings. In the presence of Colonel Irwin and others on his team, Ron employed the detectors. He found distinct metal lines down the entire length of the object, while no metal readings were obtained just outside of it. Ron asked Colonel Irwin, who had impressive scientific community connections, if he could have the strange specimen tested. Colonel Irwin sent the specimen to Los Alamos National Labs, where geophysicist John Baumgartner performed the analysis. The results of that analysis captured Dr. Baumgartner's interest. The specimen contained manganese, also titanium and aluminum, among others, and these were not in the form found in nature Due to the sophistication of the metals, he questioned whether a missile had crashed on the mountainside and Ron had found the remains. The exciting evidences of the metal lines and the analysis of the specimens brought two new researchers into the work. Dr. Baumgartner and David Fasold, a marine salvage expert who knew all about ships and their construction. They both joined the team.
Oh, look at that. Oh, well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Let me get a close-up of that. Kind of,
You want my hand in there for...
Yeah, just to point at those little flakes of iron that are coming out, like right there. There and there. Huh. That's a strong reading. Well,
I'd say that those frames right there.
Okay. Keep walking. Do you want a measuring tape to measure these things, how far apart they are?
John, as a scientist, might I take the liberty here to ask you, do you really honestly believe that you have been on the remains of Noah's Ark?
I have no doubt in my mind. This has to be a man-made structure. It's full of metal. Metal has a regular pattern to it, and the size of the thing and the shape of the thing is such that it's almost certainly a large boat.
Dr. Baumgartner and Ron scanned the entire site with 3 different types of metal detectors. Placing rocks at each metal reading, they then attached tapes to show the lines. This exciting evidence also attracted the interest of ABC's 2020.
The boat-shaped site was first found and photographed by a Turkish army captain back in 1959. It was quickly explored and dismissed as a freak of nature. But Wyatt, an amateur archaeologist, rekindled interest in it a few years ago. He brought in Dave Fasold, a marine salvage expert, to assess it. The Doomsday Mountain team brought in some high technology to explore the oldest legend of man. They began scanning their site with a molecular frequency generator. It's a device used by surgeons to pinpoint cancer tumors, and it's been used by Fasold to locate underwater treasure. This time, the molecular frequency generator began to pick up a unique pattern of iron lines beneath the earth.
Okay, bring that one up.
They began placing ribbons along those lines. The finished shape, outlined by the ribbons, was that of a huge ship, the approximate length and width of Noah's Ark, as described in the Bible. The fascinating field of ribbons soon attracted higher academic interest.
That looks like iron. Okay.
Dr. John Baumgartner, a physicist with Los Alamos Laboratories, sent samples back to the lab for analysis and confirmed that the metal they were tracing with the ribbons was indeed iron. With the width and the length known, the only remaining question was depth. By locating the depth of the hull, they could determine if the boat-shaped object had the cargo capacity described in the biblical ark. To resolve this final issue, Wyatt and Fasold brought geologist Tom Finner to Turkey with his company's heavy-duty subsurface radar equipment. Gear like this located the black box cockpit recorder on the floor of the frozen Potomac River after the Air Florida crash. It was here, several miles short of the boat-shaped site, that a waiting game began for Finner and the others. The party needed a final go-ahead from the Turkish government to complete their probe of Doomsday Mountain. The restrictions of martial law left the American explorers isolated from the outside world. Not even a telephone.
Yeah. Anyway, we're going to hang in like smell on a skunk till there's nothing left to get this done.
Hang in like the smell on a skunk. The Turkish government stopped the exploration. What now?
Since we were there, Barbara, things have cooled down, and they've sent their own team of scientists in to take a look at this site. It's a very fascinating location.
While Turkish scientists and archaeologists did their own research, Ron and his associates continued their work. The next step was subsurface interface radar.
There's the longitudinal bulkhead. You ought to see them popping out, Ron.
Yeah, there they are.
Here. There's
Yeah.
another one. There's the key line right there.
Yeah.
Oh, Ron, the lines are there! The lines are there!
Okay, we're gonna walk over,
Yeah, walk.
take a look.
Leave it running so everybody knows that we're not cheating here, right?
You got it, Toby.
Okay, now, this is the west bulkhead. Okay, can you look through there and...
All right,
This is the west bulkhead.
all right.
That was over there. And he walked easterly. Here we start getting the longitudinal bulkheads. Here, 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 here.
Okay.
Here. You see there how it shows up?
Right.
The initial scans were very impressive, showing internal structure consistent with bulkheads and rooms. But to be sure they were interpreting the data correctly, Ron took the scan printouts to Geophysical Survey Systems, the developer and manufacturer of the radar.
This data does not represent natural geology. It's a man-made structure. These reflections are occurring very periodic, too periodic to be random natural type interface.
There was no longer any doubt that this was the remains of something man-made. In late 1986, the Turks announced their decision. The ceremony was set for June 1987. During that ceremony, the governor asked Ron to demonstrate the radar on site for the journalists and military officials. When Ron showed them a readout that he said looked like an intact timber, the governor then instructed a soldier to dig right there. What emerged was this petrified section of fossilized hand-wrought timber. Sectioning showed it to be laminated wood, 5 layers of timber glued together with pitch, clearly visible oozing from the end. This fossilized specimen shows that rivets were used in its construction. Their analysis showed that they contained iron, titanium, and aluminum, among other things, very sophisticated alloys that would be resistant to water. Specimens falling out from the lower end of the ship, identified as slag by an expert in metallurgy, indicated to Ron that Noah filled the hull with slag material from his metal production of the fittings used to build the Ark. More complete radar scans revealed a ship, although damaged and collapsed in places, of very intelligent, modern design with a ramp system at the door which led to each level. In 1990, Ron performed what he called a mini excavation, where he took shovels and bent the blades into a giant razor. He and his associates then shaved off a very thin layer from one section, smoothing it to show the color difference between the structure members and the matrix. By faith, Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with godly fear, prepared an ark for the saving of his household, by which he condemned the world, and became heir of the righteousness which is according to faith. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be.
The site was first identified in 1959 by a Turkish army captain. He was studying photographs that were shot in 1958 in a NATO reconnaissance of the area. This is a reproduction of that photograph that he identified. He observed this distinctly boat-shaped object that was in a mud flow that had come down from a higher elevation. This picture was published in the Turkish newspapers, also in the United States. There was an expedition that went over the next summer, the summer of 1960, and spent 2 days investigating the site. They failed to find any obvious artifacts, so the story that they gave the press was that they felt it was only a natural formation. Nevertheless, this particular article appeared in Life magazine in the United States, went into millions of American homes, and it was widely known back in 1960. Amazingly, however, to our knowledge, there was no one who returned to this site until Mr. Wyatt and his 2 sons went there in 1977.
Ronald Wyatt of Madison, Tennessee in the United States did not believe that this marked, regular formation could have been created by nature.
We first went out to the site in 1977, and we basically just measured it and looked at it carefully. We applied to the Turkish authorities for excavation rights, and they said maybe later. Anyway, fortunately, there was an earthquake in December of '78. Now, I understand that no one actually got killed in the earthquake, so that's why I use the term fortunately. It did do a marvelous job on excavating this object. Everything that was surrounding this object, the mud flows, the ancient lava flow that was under the mud flow, fell away. And this exposed some of the timbers. I was able to get some small samples of material, also some material that turned out to be very high metal content and high carbon content. We got a carbon-14 dating of 5,700 years plus or minus 200 years, which falls right close into the range of the time setting for the flood. So we applied for permits, and we have taken metal detection equipment, and we have found metal lines all along this boat at even intervals. We have found right-angled material on the boat. It's not a mock-up of what other people thought Noah's Ark would look like. Otherwise, it could probably be in the valley where it's more convenient to get to, or else way on top of a mountain to impress people, and it would be 450 feet long. So the fact that it is where it is and the dimensions it is says that it is the authentic Noah's Ark.
In fact, they believe this rock and wood and metal configuration was at one time this, a boat, more than 500 feet long, that was built by a man named Noah.
What Wyatt found measures almost identically to the text offered in the 6th chapter of Genesis in the Old Testament. It was also found in the area where the Bible says the ark finally came to rest.
What we actually have found is physical evidence that this is a boat. Whether or not it's Noah's Ark is up to the people that review the material. That's up to them to decide on that. My personal feeling is that it is Noah's Ark. To the people that believe in God, this will be a confirmation of their faith. But I think everything is on a time schedule, and I believe that when the time is right, these things will be brought out.
Well, can you tell us about Ron Wyatt? Who was Ron Wyatt?
Who was Ron Wyatt? Ron was just a normal man. Well, he wasn't really normal, but he was a very simple man. Very simple. When he was very young, I think he told me he was about 19 years old when he decided to put the Bible to the test. You know, I mean, everyone decides at one point or another is what's true and what's not. And he came to a belief that the Bible was true, just as it was written. He used to tell a story about how he would pray to be saved and for his family and loved ones and children to be saved. And he said that it was just his life was very difficult. He didn't seem to be able to be as effective of a witness as he wanted to be. And then one day he said he prayed and asked the Lord to use him and his family to save others and to give him a burden for souls. And when he prayed that is when the Lord began to impress him to do these things. He was 27 when he first learned about this boat-shaped object in Turkey and was just obsessed with it. He believed it was the only thing that could possibly maybe be Noah's Ark for several reasons. He did not believe it could be on a volcanic mountain, but it was another 17 years before he was able to go to Turkey, and he never lost his interest.
And since then we've taken scientists up there, radar, metal detection equipment, other equipment, laboratory testing of remains, and there's no doubt at all that this is not only a boat, as attested by the greatest Turkish archaeologist on record, Dr. Ekrem Akagul. Atheist though he was, he admitted it was Noah's Ark, and we can see that it certainly is. All the specifications given in the Bible are correct. Its location, not on Big Mount Ararat, but on the mountains of Ararat to the south, and the length of it, the three decks, the doorway on the side, animal dung extracted from the inside. It all fits the Genesis record, and not only that, but place names all around the area commemorate the event.
What sort of place names?
Place names like the landing place. The crow cannot land.
And so how far above sea level is this site?
This is about 6,000 feet, about 2,000 metres above sea level. Now, for a boat of 525 feet to be at 6,000 feet up in the mountains above sea level would require something more than an ordinary local flood.
Absolutely. And the town Kazan is nearby. Is that called the town of the Eight?
Yes, that's the village of Eight.
Village of Eight.
Yes, and nearby, across the little road that goes past it, there is the remains of an old house, and there were graves that were marking the landing, rather not the landing, but the burial spots of Noah and his wife.
Really?
Yes.
And so what about the anchor stones? How far away are they?
Anchor stones are at the village of Eight. They're on the hill around. They're on a hill leading up to where the ark is. In other words, as it came in, getting into shallower land, there was a dropping of the anchors that were dropped in the water. They were raising them and dropping them off so they would no longer be an impediment as they came into land.
I was 16 years old on my first trip, and that was to Turkey, and we basically went there to find Noah's Ark. And you know, my dad just kind of worked at the hospital. He just saved up some money, and one day he came home and he said, well guys, I'm flying out to go to Turkey in 3 days. to go look for Noah's Ark. And we said, Dad, you got to take us, you know, because we didn't, you know, we wanted to go. And he said, there's no way. He said, I applied for a passport. It took me three months probably to get his passport. And he said, the plane's leaving in 3 days. There's no way. And we said, well, we can try. And so sure enough, Dad said, well, I'll tell you what, let's pray about it. And we'll go get you a passport, start getting the photos and see if we can get it. And so took us straight down there and we got our passport photos and sent it off in a rush envelope and gave them our flight date on there so they'd know we needed them back. And so pretty much after we sent that off, we didn't have much time. So the day before we were gonna leave, we packed all our bags, all our stuff, got it ready just in case, because we knew that if we were gonna get them, it would probably be that day or we weren't gonna get them at all. And so we were ready to go. And then come about 11 o'clock that day, the mail came and there were our passports. And so we had about an hour and a half to get to the airport after they got there, but we were all ready, so we just went, you know. So it was kind of a miracle in itself that me and my brother even got to go on the first one. When we flew into Ankara, we got on a bus and we went to the train station. Then we got on a train and we went to Erzurum on the train. And while we're on the train, we're going all through these mountains, and my dad didn't have any coordinates for the boat-shaped object or anything. And so he was saying, guys, we might just have come over here for nothing because I don't have any idea which way how we're gonna find this. And so we finally got over the train ride. And the train went so slow that most of the times you could have walked along beside it. It was just terrible. And we finally got a cab after that, and he drove us on down into the town, Dogobazit. And on our way in, our dad told me and my brother, he said, you know, the Bible says it, when 3 or more are gathered, you know, and pray in my name, that he'll answer it. And so he said, we really need to say a prayer that God will help us know which way to look. And so we did, and we were getting close to Dogobazit, the town close to Ararat, and the car stopped, and it was in the middle of the night, and everything just went dead, lights out, everything, and just stopped. So we had to stop real fast in the road, and we had just got done saying that prayer, just not 5-10 minutes before that. And so my father said, why don't we pile a big pile of rocks up here on the side of the road, just in case this is something God did to show us how to find it. And so, well, okay. And we piled a big pile of rocks up, and we get back in the car, and just the guy shuts the hood because he doesn't see anything, just tries it again, it starts up. And so we drive on down the road some more little ways, and then the car dies again. And so we're thinking, well, this may be just car trouble we're having, but we're gonna pile up some more rocks anyway on the side of the road. And so the same thing happened again. We got back in the car, it died again. We piled up our third pile of rocks. And then the car started, and we went on into town real late at night, got a hotel. And then the next day, we got a cab and started looking around a little bit, and we drove back out the road we came in on, and we started hiking out. We got some canteens, had one canteen of water. My dad was wearing sandals, like with his feet uncovered, and it was really hot. And so we were hiking up this hill, and our canteen had a hole in it. So we were losing water the whole time, so we drank all the water before it spilled out. And then we found a nice mountain stream, really, really cold water, and we were just hot and burning up. And so we filled our canteen and was drinking the water. It was really tasted good, you know. Figured it was melting down from the ice and stuff. And anyway, further up the hill, we found a herd of goats and horses and stuff in the stream, walking through the stream we had just struck out. But to us, it was wonderful at the time. But anyway, from that first rock, we found an anchor stone that was taller than we are. and at the top was a hole. It was teardrop shaped, and there was a big round hole, and the hole was smooth, like it had been rubbed, you know, smooth. And my dad said, that's an anchor stone. That was one of the anchors for Noah's Ark. We found a gravestone that was the shape of Noah's Ark in this graveyard. We showed this to Dad, and you know, we took pictures of it and all that. And we were then invited to this house to eat in these people's house on their dirt floor, and they fed us what they eat and made us all sick. And pretty much it was the next day, I believe, my dad went out and walked over with them. And me and my brother were there too. We walked back out, and my dad said he got to like a hill and he saw the boat-shaped object, but it was getting real late. And then that's when we left for that day. And then that night is when they came to our room and tried to rob us. You know, the miracle of us finding Noah's Ark, the car dying on the side of the road, that was one of the first times that God so directly, quickly answered a prayer. I mean, without a doubt, you know, those were 3 miracles when that car died. And just to be us and our dad, and for us to get to find all that, it's impossible. So it was all a miracle, every bit of it. We didn't do anything on our own. We prayed about everything, and God led us right to it.
There you go. Yeah. And that's 8-9 feet down. Yeah. That's nice. This is big stuff. Yeah.
El 20 de junio de 1987, después de 10 años de intensas investigaciones, el gobierno turco anunció al mundo el descubrimiento del Arca de Noé y la dedicación de la misma y el área circundante como un parque nacional. En el año 1977, Ron Wyatt hizo su primer viaje a estas áreas. Fue durante este primer viaje que Ron encontró numerosas gigantescas piedras de anclaje, todas aproximadamente del mismo tamaño como la que vemos aquí. Todas estaban en directo alineamiento con la figura de barco, evidenciando que habían sido sueltas en el sitio donde finalmente el barco reposaría. Estas contienen inscripciones antiguas de los 8 sobrevivientes del diluvio. En diciembre de 1978, un terremoto en esta altamente remota área hizo que el terreno alrededor de la formación cayera. Y por primera vez la madera de la cubierta y las costillas fueron visiblemente expuestas en los lados. Una grieta grande también se formó a lo largo y le fue posible medir la profundidad y tomar muestras para análisis. El análisis demostró un alto contenido de carbón orgánico consistente de madera antigua. Más tarde, una inspección mediante detector de metales y radar de interfase de la superficie reveló una increíble estructura de hechura humana encapsulada dentro de la formación. Quillas y sobrequillas, espacios, puentes y aún divisiones entre los cajones se hicieron visibles a través de estos aparatos científicos. ¿Creía usted que el Arca de Noé en realidad existía? Lo que parecía un cuento de hadas puede ser corroborado con hechos probados. La búsqueda ha sido continua desde los tiempos bíblicos. En un momento van a conocer unas personas que están positivas de que han encontrado el arca. Sabemos que tales reclamaciones han sido hechas antes. Hace unos meses que estas personas vinieron a 2020 con las instancias de algunos hallazgos nuevos. Le seguimos a las montañas de Turquía Oriental. Lo que verán es una extravagante aventura, con una hueste de caracteres disímiles. La historia de Tom Gerald toma muchos sesgos y vueltas. Consideren que si el relato bíblico de la creación es un hecho y no fábula, entonces la teoría de la evolución está toda mojada. Los descubrimientos confirmados serían el más grande hallazgo arqueológico de todos los tiempos y provee a los fundamentalistas religiosos toda la evidencia de que la Biblia es absolutamente confiable. Así, el Arca de Noé ha venido a ser el artículo más controversial que haya sido registrado por el hombre. Esa es la seductora belleza que nos atrae aquí cerca del monte Ararat. Los exploradores que buscan el arca dicen que es el punto más alto en estos alrededores y que cuando las aguas del diluvio bajaron, el arca se depositó ahí. Pero la Biblia describe las montañas de Ararat, montañas en plural. Cabe la posibilidad de que el arca hubiese reposado en un sistema de montañas más pequeñas cerca de Ararat. Tal teoría es aborrecible a los antiguos fundamentalistas. Los verdaderos creyentes que son inflexibles en su fe creen que la Biblia solamente señala a Ararat como el sitio del arca. Pero ahora hay dos fundamentalistas que están contradiciendo dicho reclamo. Ellos son los nuevos creyentes. Ron Wyatt y David Fessel creen que han encontrado el arca en una ladera de lo que la gente local llama montañas del día del juicio final, algunas 15 millas al sur de Ararat. Los buscadores del arca todavía hacen su expedición a pie, profundo en los valles circundantes. Aquí, siguiendo a un aldeano local y con un mapa en la palma de la mano, Wyatt y Fessel hacen lo que ellos consideran unos importantes y excitantes descubrimientos. Aparentemente usan antiguas piedras sepulcrales que conmemoran la sobrevivencia de Noé y su familia. Cuando los cristianos primitivos encontraron estas cosas, esculpieron las 8 cruces en honor a los 8 sobrevivientes. El valle entero se conoce como la región de los 8. El significado de la colocación de las cruces en las piedras es una representación de la cabeza de la familia, su esposa, sus 3 hijos y sus 3 nueras. Y como se puede ver, las cruces a la izquierda son la familia adquirida y las que están a la derecha son la familia fundamental. Confirman la historia de Noé. Para Wyatt y Fessel, estas piedras están en directo alineamiento con la forma de barco que aparece en las montañas del día del juicio final. El lugar con la forma de barco fue inicialmente encontrado mediante fotografía tomada por un capitán del ejército turco en el año 59. Fue prontamente explorado, pero fue abandonado como un fenómeno de la naturaleza. Pero Wyatt, un arqueólogo aficionado, se interesó hace unos cuantos años. Él trajo a David Fessel, experto en salvamento marino, para estudiarla. La cuadrilla de la montaña del juicio final trajo equipo de alta tecnología para explorar la más vieja leyenda sobre el hombre. Ellos empezaron a examinar el sitio con un generador de frecuencia molecular. Es un aparato usado por los médicos para detectar tumores cancerosos y ha sido usado por Fessel para localizar tesoros bajo el agua. Esta vez, el generador de frecuencia molecular empezó a registrar un patrón uniforme de líneas de hierro bajo la tierra. Ellos empezaron a colocar cintas a lo largo de esas líneas. La forma final delineada por estas cintas era la de un barco gigante con el aproximado largo y ancho del Arca de Noé, como se describe en la Biblia. El campo fascinante de las cintas tenía un interés académico altamente atractivo. El doctor John Baumgartner, un geofísico de los laboratorios de Los Álamos, envió muestras para análisis y confirmó que el metal que estaban rastreando dentro de las cintas era de hecho hierro. Con el ancho y el largo conocido, lo único que quedaba por conocer era la profundidad. Localizando la profundidad del casco, podrían determinar si el objeto con la formación de barco tenía la capacidad de carga descrita en el Arca Bíblica. Para resolver este asunto decisivo, Wyatt y Fessel trajeron al geólogo Tom Fenner de Turquía con su equipo de radar de subsuelo. Equipo como este localizó la caja negra de grabación de la cabina en el lecho de un río congelado después del desastre de la línea aérea Florida. Supongamos que esta piedra esté a 2 pies de profundidad. ¿Podría localizarla? Sí, se podría. ¿Es posible que en un momento dado se pueda decidir que esto es un objeto hecho por el hombre? La simetría de la figura sugiere que es un barco. Espero probar que la estructura subterránea es de hecho la de un barco. De hecho, hay algo debajo de esas piedras, además de piedras. Diseñado por el sistema de servicios geofísicos en Hudson, fue usado en la montaña. El aparato llamado SURF es utilizado por compañías exploradoras de energía para analizar lo que hay debajo de la superficie de la Tierra. De acuerdo al SURF, algo de hechura humana está debajo de la montaña ruida. Esta data no representa geología natural. Es una estructura de hechura humana. Estas imágenes están ocurriendo con demasiada frecuencia como para ser interfaces naturales ocasionales. El gobernador de esa provincia le pidió a Ron una demostración de radar cuando se encontró lo que parecía un pedazo de madera roto cerca de la superficie. Hizo que se excavara y se le diera a Ron para que fuera verificado. La prueba de laboratorio revela carbón orgánico. Era madera petrificada. Pero la prueba decisiva fue cuando lo cortaron. La evidencia era obvia. No solamente se podía ver la estructura interna, sino que también era claramente madera laminada. 3 capas separadas se podían ver. El material pegajoso o cola se había escurrido y endurecido en un extremo y estaba perfectamente alineado con las capas internas. En mi último viaje a ese lugar este junio pasado, encontramos este muy impresionante remache, y si pueden ver aquí, la placa es un poquito más de 1/4 de pulgada de espesor. Es aproximadamente de 3,5 pulgadas de diámetro, y el eje es apenas de 1 a 1,25 pulgadas de diámetro. Y si pueden ver, fue golpeada mientras estaba caliente para darle forma acampanada donde termina el eje, de manera que no se deslizara hacia atrás a través del orificio de esta arandela. Y esto demuestra que la habilidad para usar metales era muy avanzada y muy sofisticada. Y amigos, hay miles de estos remaches en este barco. De hecho, cada unión donde la estructura de madera era juntada por grandes placas de metal que son predominantemente de hierro, y entonces estos remaches. ¿Cómo el tamaño de la estructura compara con los que son mencionadas en la Biblia? Bien, Moisés fue educado en Egipto, y se nos dice de eso en el Nuevo Testamento y también en el Antiguo Testamento, y el cúbico real egipcio con el cual estaba familiarizado y que creemos fueron usados en las dimensiones del arca es de 20.6 pulgadas, y 300 de ellos son exactamente 515 pies. Y ese es el largo del barco. El barco se ha aplanado algo, pero eso es de esperarse de un barco envejeciente. Así que el ancho es mayor que el especificado en la Biblia, pero usted puede calcular el grado de expansión y puede así llegar a las medidas aproximadas muy similares a las mencionadas en la Biblia. El gobierno turco recientemente ha terminado un hermoso centro de visitantes justamente más arriba del arca, de manera que visitantes de todos los credos, de todas las naciones, puedan visitar y ver el arca por ellos mismos.
We didn't do anything on our own. We prayed about everything, and God led us right to it.